I would lock myself in the bathroom and spend hours digging into my skin. It was like I wasn't in control of myself, and I would keep picking and picking at my scabs until the skin broke, and then I could breathe a sigh of relief. During middle school, I was never really popular. I didn't have many friends, and I always felt out of place. Then, when I contracted fungal infection, things got much worse for me, and I began to get picked on by my classmates. They either ignored me completely or acted like I was a parasite. It all started when I went with my friend to a nearby city and saw a kitten on the road. It was so cute and small, and I ended up playing with it. I didn't think anything of it until a few weeks later when I started to get itchy. It started out as a small tickle here and there, but then it turned into a full-blown itch all over my scalp, and I couldn't stop scratching. The problem was that the more I scratched, the worse the itch got. It felt like my head was constantly on fire, and it would bleed all the time. I had no idea what was going on with myself, and felt like something was really wrong. I tried to stop scratching, but I couldn't. It became a serious habit, and I would wake up with blood on my pillow and bloody marks all over my head. This only gave my classmates more ammunition to use against me. As I would get home from school, I would lock myself in the bathroom and spend hours digging into the itchy scabs and making them bleed. It was only once the skin broke that I would be able to breathe. Eventually, my parents started to notice my scratching and could see open wounds all over my head. They demanded to look at it and found deep, ring-shaped cuts everywhere. At first, my parents sat there shocked, but my mom quickly called the doctors to book me in for the next day. I was so afraid that something was completely wrong with me, and the anxiety only made me itch more. On the day of my appointment, I tried to hide the dried up spots all over my head, but I just couldn't help but break them again and again. I felt like the nurses were looking at me in shock, like this was the worst thing they had ever seen, when really, they had probably seen this and worse a million times before. I just couldn't help it though. I felt so embarrassed, so I spent most of my time looking down, my eyes locked onto the white tiles. As soon as the doctor came through the door, he sat down and inspected my head. He then drew back into his chair and diagnosed me with ringworm. At first, I was so confused. Ringworm? How was that even possible? How could a worm get onto your head? I didn't understand what it meant at all, but then the doctor explained that it was a fungal infection that develops on the top layer of your skin, not an actual worm. The infection is characterized by a red circular rash with clearer skin in the middle. It can cause intense itching and is also called tinea corporis. It is closely related to athlete's foot, tinea pedis, and jock itch, tinea cruris. I couldn't believe it. My mom tried to hold my hand, but all I could do was sit there stunned. How did I even contract something like this? The doctor went on to explain that sometimes your immune system just cannot fight things off, and only some people will catch it and others won't. Ringworm feeds off the dead skin cells and hairs. It is passed along by direct skin-to-skin contact and can be gotten from an animal or a person. It is a very common infection to get amongst kids. The bad thing about catching ringworm is that it can have very intense inflammatory reactions that can cause swelling and lead to pus coming out. I never saw the ring-shaped spots on my head. All I could see was scabs. But my parents listened to the doctor, and he prescribed me with a super stinky shampoo to help with the spots and lessen the itch. The doctor also gave a note saying that I had to wear a hat at school to try to stop me from itching. I was grateful that I would no longer have to show my hair and started wearing hats every day, which stopped my classmates from noticing my cuts. Until one day, as I sat down in class and a classmate of mine came up and started being nice to me. I was taken aback, but I was grateful to finally have someone to talk to when he asked why I wore a cap. I ended up telling him that I had an infection called ringworm and that I had to wear a cap to get better. But rumors started to spread around school that I had actual worms and bugs in my hair and on my scalp. I was completely embarrassed. I was avoided by my classmates and ignored by my teachers. A few people who already were mean to me before got meaner, and I just felt very, very alone. Eventually, the ringworm went away, but I was left with the itchy scabs on my scalp for most of my time in 8th grade. I eventually asked another doctor about them, and they said I should go to see a dermatologist. So my parents scheduled me an appointment, and I went to see her and finally got some answers. I was not diagnosed with ringworm this time. I was told I had dermatitis, which is an inflammation of the skin that can cause intense dandruff on the scalp. Another example is atopic dermatitis, otherwise known as eczema, and it can also cause the skin to blister, ooze, develop a crust, or flake off. It happens when the skin comes in contact with any number of substances, such as poison ivy, soaps, and jewelry with nickel in it. There was finally a treatment plan put in place, and I was prescribed a special shampoo. I had to use it every other day, along with a couple of other over-the-counter medicines which I took on the other days. This seemed to help, and I finally stopped having the urge to dig at my scalp. But my battle with dermatitis was not over yet, because I ended up getting it again, but this time, much worse. I had scabs all over my back and was forced to go back to the doctors, where they prescribed me with lots of soap and cream to keep the wounds from getting infected, as well as forcing myself not to itch. That night, I made myself a bath with a few drops of tea tree oil. It helped soothe my skin and prep it for the ointment. I had to repeat this step every night for months. And even though I hated the feeling of being sticky, I knew it was the only way I could get better, and so I pushed through. It took me a few months, but I was finally able to defeat ringworm and dermatitis, and my skin is mostly back to normal, aside from a few scars that I am left with as a memory. I am now a senior in high school, and I have made some great close friends that accept me and my scars. I wanted to share my story to let others who might be experiencing skin conditions like mine to get it checked out by a professional, as getting the diagnosis right is very important, and there are plenty of great antifungal creams and shampoos that help. Please do not leave it for as long as I did, and I promise you will get better.